Hello, and welcome to the latest pep talk from the Content Club. And I've written down some notes here, and the first point is that I'm starting to thank Content Design London for making these pep talks happen. They give us a little bit of money that we can pay the speakers. That's it. I was going to use the word talkers, the speakers, and that's really appreciate that. Content Design London are awesome. They've got some good books out, and they have some great training courses. So if you haven't seen any of the books or courses, have a look. Right, today we have got Kris McGill. I first met Kris around 2 years ago, and it was in Scottish Government subsidised cafe, sitting at the table. We were all members of a lunch club, and we went out. It was the only time I ever went out. All members of the lunch club, and we'd go and rate what we had that day from the Scottish Government canteen. You can see we have so much fun at the Scottish Government. But anyway, just before Christmas, I was having a talk with Kris about something, and an idea popped into my head about asking him to come along and talk about user research, insights, and how we can understand them better. So I don't want to spoil his talk, so I'm going to pass over to Kris now.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so let me share my screen. I'm new to Google Meet, so let me get this to work nice for me. I'm going to share my entire screen. 3, 2. Nice. So ignore that. Does that come up? Everyone see that okay? Wonderful. Right, okay. I've got it up on the screen as well, so I might look a little bit. So basically, yeah, Tom, let me see when I press present if that messes it up. It does. Give me a second. Great. That's working well. So yeah, me and Tom were speaking before about, what kind of thing I could talk about this, and insights is always one of those things. I think that the way that people view insights, particularly within UCD teams, sometimes it's something that a researcher will go away and create and then come back with it. But that's not the way I view insights. I view them as very much a team sport, and I think to get the best ones, it's very much everybody in the UCD team that should be involved with. So I'll tell you a little about that. I think the talk will probably, I've not run through it, so I don't know. I think it'll take about 30 minutes, give or take, so we'll see. And I'm Kris. So Tom introduced me there, but I'm a user researcher at the Scottish Government, a senior user researcher, and I've been a researcher for a decade. I come from a clinical research background, to be honest. I don't come from a design background, so maybe slightly different than some of the people that have spoke here before. But I'm going to start this off by telling you a little bit about my career. So I'll start it there so you could see where we're going to go. So this is the content for today. So basically, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I get into research, and then I'm going to jump into the important stuff for today, which is what is user research, how to find true insights. It's easy to find insights. How do we find the true ones? And then I'm going to tell you a little bit of an example of something we did at the government that was a kind of UR in content design love story. It was a really good example of the way things can work when you approach development, research, design decisions as a team rather than just individual people. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But I'll start by telling you about how I get into research. The reason I'm doing this is because I know when I've went to kind of guest presentations before, the best presentations I've seen kind of set the content for who the person is before they tell you about what they're there to talk about. So I'm not diving straight into talk about insights. I'm going to tell you about me a little bit and how I got into research. So I know that everyone in this group is interested in those squiggly careers and how we get to where we get to. So I'm going to start a little bit there. I'm going to start with a beautiful picture of me as a baby. So I'm going way back, and actually there is some reason for that, and I'll tell you about it. But this is me, as you can see, very, very handsome child. And in case anyone was in doubt, my mum had definitely dressed me up as a Scottish child, so there's no way to deny that I'm Scottish with my tartan shoes on. And basically, at this age, we grew up in Irvine and Ayrshire on the west coast of Scotland, the California of Scotland, I like to call it. It's beautiful. So basically, the reason that I'm starting here, though, is because this is about to take a sad turn slightly. So just to be trigger warning, I'm about to talk about a family member having a stroke. So if MD would be affected by that, you're welcome to. It'll be over in about a minute or less than that. So basically, when I was about this age, my gran had a really big stroke. And overnight, my mum became a full-time carer for my gran, which meant I became a full-time carer for my gran as a baby because I was there every single day. But the reason this is of interest is because it was through that I grew up with a grandparent that's behaviour was very different from everyone, and I never knew that growing up. It was totally different. So I would see the behaviour in my gran, and it was as I started to get older that I realised that, wait a minute, she's a little bit different in the way she behaves from other people, particularly around about speech. So the production of communication and language was very, very different. And when that started to get better, also the left-hand side of her body was a bit, it was affected with the stroke. So it affected the way she behaved, and it affected the way she interacted with the world. And then when she started to get a bit better, about 2 years later, through conversation, we knew, it was more than 2 years later, through conversation, she knew how interested I was in all that stuff about who she was and how she was different. And she started to go back to second-hand shops, which was like her favourite thing in car boot sales. And she found me this, which is a psychology textbook. So this is probably, God, I don't even know how old it is, maybe 20 years old, this book. But I had no idea what psychology was. She bought me that. I started to read through it, and that's when I made the decision that I wanted to move into psychology, because I was so interested in the way that people behave and how our brains are different and how we interact with stuff is all different depending on who we are. So that is why I decided to study psychology rather than anything else. And then that took me into a career in psychology as a researcher. So I did an undergraduate degree in Strathclyde University, and my dissertation focused on interrogative suggestibility, which is how people react in interview settings, particularly police interview settings, and it's where false confessions come from. It's where people, say stuff that isn't actually true. It's about all that stuff and how the interviewer and the interviewee, the relationship between those two people, can create outcomes that aren't always a reflection of truth. It's basically, if anyone's seen Making a Murderer, you'll know that, the nephew ended up going to jail for something and false confessing to something he probably was absolutely nothing to do with, but he ended up going there, and that's what my dissertation was on. And anybody that knows psychology, I bet there's people on this call that have a psychology background. The degree is a research degree. It's not about clinical psychology. It's not about that side of things. It's not about counselling. It is a research degree. And that's where I kind of fell in love with research. So after that, I did a PhD in research methodology, which is as exciting as it sounds. It's basically research on research. And what I was researching was the development of clinical trials and how we can make a clinical trial in a way that it can get the best result and the truest reflection of the data so that people can make decisions off the back of it. And that was in stroke rehabilitation. So all the way back to my gran having a stroke when I was a baby, that's what I did my PhD in, and that's what I worked in for like 6 or 7 years, was stroke rehabilitation clinical trials. I think the most interesting stuff that I worked on back then was prosopagnosia, which is when someone loses the ability to recognise faces. Don't know if anyone's heard of Oliver Sacks, the author, which is, I think it's the man who mistook his wife for a hat. She lost the ability to recognise faces. So that was probably one of the most interesting things that I did. But I don't know everybody's background in the call, but academia is not a nice world. It is a very, very horrible world, if I'm being 100% honest. And then what happened is I stumbled and fell into user research. So I knew absolutely nothing about user research while I was working in academia for like 8 years or so. And basically an advert came up within it just came into my emails, and it was for a user research role. And I didn't know anything about it. I just saw the word researcher, and then I looked into it, and it sounded like all the good parts of research, and it stripped away a lot of the stuff in research that doesn't matter. So I was really, really interested in that, and I applied. And it was only during the interview process and talking to Jenny Crichton, who actually was a content designer before she was a user researcher, when I went, God, that sounds fantastic, that user-centered design stuff where we all work together collaboratively. There's no kind of ivory tower of what research is or should be. We find the meaning in what we're looking at together, and we iterate and make decisions and all that stuff. So, and that's still true. I still absolutely love this world compared to everything I've done before. It's a fantastic place to work. But that's the sentimental stuff over where I'm going to take you into user research now. So what is user research? I think everyone on the call will have opinions on that, and I'm sure that For some of us, it's something that someone goes and does. It's one person's job. For others, it might be a part of your job as a UCD professional, and it tends to balance between one person does it as a dedicated role or we all do it. I'm of the mindset that we should all do it. It's a story for another time. But I wanted to start this off with what user research isn't, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is, particularly if anyone works in kind of complex product teams where you're dealing with people that don't know design in any way. What it's not is people's opinion and what they don't like about something. That's definitely not what it is. It is not a collection of stories that people have told us either. People often think that research and insights are anecdotes, and you'll hear people say this all the time, well, we can't do that based on anecdotes. But that's not what it is. It's a lot more than that. It's also not a large list of repetitive questions, which means typically, in my opinion, it's not surveys. It can be, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's not bread and butter user research for me. That's slightly different. And it's also not what people say they want, which a lot of people think it is as well. They think it's either a list of complaints or it's someone saying, I want this. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail when I go into how we pull insights and what we do with them. So what is user research? So I found this definition online that I quite like. So user research focuses on understanding user behavior, needs, motivations through interviews, surveys, some of the time, usability evaluations, and other forms of feedback methodologies. It is used to understand how people interact with products and evaluate whether design solutions meet their needs. I like that. I agree with that as well. It does that. This field of research aims to improve the user experience of products, services, or processes by incorporating experimental and observational research methods to guide design, development, and refinement of a product. I'd argue it's more the observational side of things than the experimental side of things, although A/B testing has an experimental element, but it's still observational in my opinion. And user research is used to improve a multitude of products like websites, medical devices, banking, government service, and many more. It's an iterative process that can be used at any time during product development and is a core part of user-centered design. Don't worry, that's the last time I'm going to read stuff off a slide. That, to me, though, encapsulates really quite well what user research is in quite a nice way. The way I was going to approach this slide originally was for me to just write it, and then I had about 7 bashes at that, and it never quite captured it. So this is also the first paragraph on Wikipedia, so you're welcome to go there and have a look at that if you like. It does mean that user research uses a lot of different methods, like A/B testing that I mentioned. It can be surveys at times, but it can be card sorting, tree testing, diary studies, focus groups. I've got problems with them as well. If anybody wants to know at the end, ask me about it. User interviews, from a discovery point of view, I think they're very, very good. And then the bread and butter, which I would argue is a usability test or a field study, and probably a little bit of both of them together is the kind of environment that creates the truest situation for the extraction of insights, in my opinion. And there's loads of outputs, and I'm sure you've seen lots of these, and these are not just about user research. These can be outputs from a full UCD team. Sense-making sessions are important, and I'll go into them a little bit, but we also help design prototypes. We develop user needs. I've got strong opinions on user needs. Today, I'm not focusing on them. I'm focusing on insights, because I think the insight is the core to what we can use to guide evidence-based design decision-making, rather than a user needs, which I use more as a kind of category or a kind of core user need for an overall principle or something that's needed within a design, which just doesn't really help us make individual choices, and I think that's where insights come in. You also have user story mapping, user groups and personas, and insights to action, which is something that I'm big on, but the development of those insights is key. So that takes us on to the bulk of the presentation, which is the main thing I wanted to talk about, which is how to find true insights. That's a new T. What's that called? Feel new. That's lovely. So how do we actually find the true insight? And I think that this is a very important question, and related to this is what is an insight? And I'll go into all these. So what is an insight? So I've started with a very technical definition. Oh, it came in a fun way. So it's the important thing that happened. There's loads and loads of definitions online about what an insight is. There's loads of over-technical like explanations of what these are, but let's be honest, that's what it is. We're looking for meaning in what we're looking at when we observe behaviour, and I'll go into observing behaviour more, but we're just looking for the meaning. There's then you scale it up and it's about pattern. You're looking for meaning across more than one person most of the time. I'll go into that as well, but I think that in its essence, an insight is the important thing that you've seen that happened when someone interacted with something. And that's all we're looking for when we do research. We're just looking for the important thing that can guide our decision making in an informed way. Sometimes people talk about insights just as pain points, and probably most of the time the category of the insight apple would come under a pain point, but it can be a good thing as well. It's not just always the stumbling block that someone comes up against when they are looking at a page, when they're trying to interact with a website. It's not just that. It can also be something that works really well for them in a page that allows us to know that that works as a design pattern that we can use going forward. Sometimes people get too fixated in the pain points or where people struggle. The good stuff is important as well. And user needs a part of this story. I touched on that, but for me, they're probably not the focus. They are overarching and they sit above the process as a general principle guider for what someone needs from something. In my opinion, the insights are the kind of fine-grained detail of the stuff that we want to deal with. I think that there's 3 main steps to get to the best insights possible. And for you, you should definitely be involved in sense making. You should be involved in theming and insights. And if you run sessions yourself, or if you're involved with helping set them up, you should also be thinking about these kind of setting up the sessions as well. But these are the 3 things for me. There's setting up the sessions for success, and I'm going to talk about that in a little detail. And then there's sense making, but sense making for me has 2 distinct parts. It is theming, where we just put things into buckets, and then it has the insight extraction, where we actually find the meaning from the bucket. So setting research up that gets you real insights, there's some vital steps within this. For me, one of the biggest learning curves when I moved away from academia, where I was focusing on people's thoughts and feelings, which does factor into this and is important. We put, in my previous life, we put almost all our stock in what someone said. But the truth is that people, all of us in this call, are terribly inaccurate when it comes to talking about our own behaviour. One of the clearest examples of that is if when you fill out any kind of medical form and ask you how much you drink in a week, no one can accurately answer that, and it's not because you don't want to. Sometimes it might be, but a lot of the time it's because you have your own bias that creeps in. You have your own kind of cognitive misers that come in and they change the way that you think about stuff and the way that you report. And often if we're asked questions like, how do you feel about this? How would you interact with this? We can't accurately account for how we'll deal with something. So what research sessions need to do is focus on what the person does. And I think that it's almost always more important than what they say. What people say are important as long as the questions are designed correctly. Not designed correctly asked. I don't really design questions before sessions. I allow sessions to run quite naturally with the person's behaviour, and then just have prompts where I ask them when I see them get stuck on something. It's very important that we focus on that behaviour, and I think that the questions need to do that. They should be focused and rooted in behaviour. They should not be asking somebody, what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? Unless sometimes how they feel is important. It can be if they're in a state of anxiety, or if we think something's going to cause anxiety, because it then affects behaviour. But behaviour should be the main focus for the setup of sessions to make sure you get to the truest insights. This is why, and I could have used this slide in all different pages, but I think it fits quite nicely as a metaphor. We'll all have seen this slide before. It's the UCD slide, I know that we use all the time, but that path that someone's made, that probably hundreds of people have maybe walking on it, that's the insight. That's what it is, it's the behaviour. So we know that that's the way people would actually go, that they would deal with this situation in front of them. But if you ask them, they'd have just said, oh, I need a path. And then if you had walked them up and showed them this situation and said, how do you feel about this? They'd have said, oh, that path looks nice. But if you said, show me how you would use this straight across the goal, they don't use the path, they use a different way. So we focus on behaviour, we get closer to this shortcut. We don't get the big long-winded conversation or anecdote that they give. The other element of the asking questions that I mentioned in probing is you need to be so careful with how you ask questions. it's really difficult if you're not used to it to ask questions that aren't leading, so you need to be careful about it. So here's an example. Our new solution lets you store all your social media events in the cloud and manage them through one easy to use interface on the mobile device. You'd use that, wouldn't you? Yeah, I suppose I would. The person goes, yes, and then they take the note and said person likes it. This is an extreme example, but like I see this in life. I do see people that are particularly new to research, and they'll unintentionally ask stuff in a way that primes the person to respond in a certain way, or the question's closed so it's not open enough. It doesn't give them enough options with their answer. So the development of those questions and not being leading is really important. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that it's important within our research sessions to create an environment that's as close to real life as possible. Let's say you're working on a letter. There's no point in giving a letter without any context and saying, what do you think about that? Because it doesn't position it within the natural place that it would sit for them when they dealt with it. The best way to do that is to give it to someone within that position that they should be in, like an actual real life. Here you go, this is where you should be. What do you think about this? But we can't always do that for loads of different reasons. You're probably working in letters or websites that only factor in for certain environments at certain times, and it's hard to get the people right in that moment to then give it to them. So you can use stuff like storyboarding to really put the person in the right mindset of where they've been before, and then use that to kind of guide it. So it's in as close to real context as possible. So you're getting to as close to that real behaviour as you can. That's it, setting them up. There's loads more I could say about that, but I think that's for me, that's the kind of main principles of setting up a session for success. And the next thing I wanted to talk about is theming. So this is sense-making theming. I believe it's the second step of getting to those true insights. The theming basically just means taking things that go together and putting them in a bucket together. It comes from qualitative research. So the two kind of main worlds of research in the past have been quantitative, which is numbers. So like a clinical trial of like a vaccine efficiency, for example. And the opposite side of that is the qualitative research, which focuses on lived experience, what it actually means to live as part of something. And that, in my opinion, is the better research, because quantitative research that focuses on numbers is great for telling you what, but it will never, ever tell you why. Qualitative research will always tell you why. A lot of the kind of theming principles come from grounded theory. I'm not going to go into that in loads of detail. You probably don't need to either. If you did, you can have a Google of it and you'll see it. It's one of the kind of founding fathers of qualitative research. But none of the theory really matters. I'm an incredibly practical person. All you're doing is putting stuff that goes together into a bucket and then giving it a simple title. That's it. There's no science to it. You're just finding things that go together and putting them together. And I'm just going to go in a little bit to what it looks like. I know that this is a difficult slide to read, and you can see that I've professionally redacted it, so you can't see the individual notes within it as well. But basically what you're looking at right now is just a few different examples of what that sense making would look like. On the left-hand side of the screen is MyGov, so it's a website, and then on the top of the screen, running right across from left to right, is individual pages from an interest, like a software that's used by internal staff users, so a slightly more technical angle and user research. And then the zoomed in bit is just a zoomed in part of that where you can see. So basically you can see it there. All you've got is you've got a set of notes from different people that all make sense to sit underneath. Writing free text questions is a really simple title. And then the other one there is question bank. And that's just a really simple label. And then all of the notes that were relevant across multiple sessions have been brought and dropped underneath that. And these titles can be a lot simpler than that. They could be page layout. They could be page navigation. They could be language. They could be things like that. But it's just about getting stuff in an order that makes sense before you start to actually pull your meaning from it. And these sense-making sessions are typically conducted by user researchers, but in my opinion, the full user-centered design team should be involved with this, and there's reasons for that, and I'll go into it when I talk more about pulling the insights, because it becomes more important there. But basically, that's the two steps. So set a session up for success where you're focusing on behavior, and then you take your notes and you take them and you put them into simple buckets. That's the kind of first two steps. And then the next step is actually pulling out the insight from within them. Now, I think that this is when collaboration is essential. I'll talk specifically about collaboration at the end of this, because I think it should run throughout all of this to get to the best insights. But this is the time where it cannot be skipped, it cannot be missed. No single person can go in and pull the insights out of something with the bias creeping in, with the, you know, just their own interpretation of it, without kind of, you know, sounding it off other people, without seeing other people's interpretations of what they felt or seen or read. It's so important, and there's loads of different ways to run them. I'm not going to go into them. Everyone here, I'm sure, runs workshop style stuff all the time. That's all this is. I would encourage any kind of collaboration people can do in terms of getting people to interact with the board. That's the way I do it. I use stickers, which always seems to work. The bin fire one always works a treat. People love the bin fire sticker to put on stuff. But any way that people can interact with it, and I tend to split these sessions up to allow them to read. In an ideal world, you would send it to them for them to read through the sticky notes beforehand, so that they know the notes and the stuff that's in the buckets and the simple themes. But in the world I work in, and I'm sure lots of people are the same, no one's got time to dedicate 30 minutes before a session, so you need to allocate that time in the session. And then I use the next 30 minutes for the important bit, to let go. What is it that theme's telling us? Read the sticky notes under that simple theme and really pull out what it is that it means. The example here is we've got the writing free text questions. We know that there's loads of simple stuff underneath that makes sense. But you read through them as a team and you discuss it. What is the kind of real meaning behind that? What's the real thing in there? For this one, it was that decision makers feel confident using free text boxes, and they focus their questions on confirmation. But then the caveat to that was, and this is above the question bank one, is we could see quite clearly that they feel confident with a free text box, but not filling it in. What they need to do is go to their own banks of questions and bring stuff in. I know that's a slightly abstract example because it's from like an internal staff working process, but it just kind of shows the logical, you know, step between a theme to an insight. The important thing here as well to mention is that when we ask people, this comes back to the behaviour thing, when we ask people, you know, how do you feel putting your own question into that box there to send out to people to get information back? They go, oh, love it, I'll be able to do that, absolutely no bother. And then we would be like, all right, okay, when you go, let's see you do it then. And they wouldn't start typing in the box. They would literally open a Word document that they've had floating about, and they would pull out questions that were predefined and pre-made that they'd used before. So when you asked them to describe what they were going to do, they said, I'll be able to write something in that, no bother. When you ask them to behave, it's not the way they behave. You need to look at the behaviour. One of the important things that comes up a lot here, and people get really bogged in with how many people said it, how many people said that thing. And I get a lot of pushback from that as well. When people don't understand research methodology, they ask me that a lot because they're used to like stuff like surveys and that kind of thing, where the number of people does matter, because you're looking for statistical significance, which is not what we're looking for. And I love to tell them this: it doesn't matter how many people said it. It doesn't matter. But I'll show you a way that I generally think about it, and it's with potholes in the road. So how many people would it take to go over that very small pothole there before anybody even thought about fixing it? And this is assuming that the council's good and likes to fix potholes. Probably, but 100 people if it didn't, maybe 1,000 people if it didn't start to get worse. So there's an insight there. There's something in that. There's something that needs fixed. There's something that needs dealt with. But it's not that prominent that it would take a lot of people to stumble over that thing, to misunderstand that word, to not click that button right before we would really go, that's something we need to action. We need to use that to make a design decision. But then you get the kind of middle of the road ones where, right, wait a minute, someone, if they hit that, they may be damaging a wheel. That's quite a big problem, actually, that they'll be hitting. We probably only need a few people to hit that pothole before someone goes, we need to fix that if the council's decent. So, I mean, basically, 6, 7, 8 people maybe hit that, and we decide to fix it, depending on the severity. So you can see there that there's different tiers to this, and the number of people doesn't matter. It's actually the severity of the issue that causes us to know that we need to deal with something, that something is a true insight. And of course, if this happens and someone picks it up, they try and use it, and it's a car crash, they can't do it. It only takes one person for that to be an insight that's something that we need to deal with. Sometimes the powers that be will argue that well, that's just one person not using it right. If that one person's not using it right to that extent that it breaks, other people are going to break it as well. So it's something that needs to be dealt with. And that it's one of the ways that I think about insights a lot, because it is subjective. There's no way around that. What you're doing is subjective. You're finding meaning in a pattern of notes that fall under a theme. That's what you're doing. But that's a kind of guiding principle for me. How severe was the problem? How severe could the impact of the problem be? I'm always considering that when I try and pull a true insight. And if it is the smaller things that are just about usability, about how friendly it is to use, then if you've got the time, you should be dealing with them as well. But there is bigger things in the truer insights as well that you need to deal with before you get to that stage sometimes. I just wanted to touch on, because it's important when we're considering insights and how to pull it, a user need versus a user want. You remember right at the start that I told you that it's not what users want. That's not what user research is. We don't just give people what they want. And the most famous quote on that is Henry Ford said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would just have asked for faster horses. And you can see that I've picked the most majestic horse I could find on the internet to represent that. But obviously then he's talking about the fact that people don't actually know that what they need in that environment is not just faster horses, they actually need cars. They need something above and beyond that will deliver the need, whether it's getting from A to B efficiently, whether it's taking stuff on that journey and all that stuff. Like the need is not the want, because sometimes people don't know the kind of capabilities of what you're dealing with and what you can deliver. They just are looking at the thing in front of you if they tell you what they want. The most up-to-date example I saw that Tom sent me was Skyscanner, where it's very clear that what's happened is, they've been doing a wee bit of testing, or even a survey feedback, probably feedback on the website, and people have been like, I want an option for direct flights. And they've went, wonderful, let's design that. There's a button. You can now click that button, and that button will give you direct flights. That's a user want. That's not a user need, because who wants to look at a 40-hour flight between here and London, for example, to get it as cheap as possible? The user need is actually to have the flight options presented to them in a very meaningful way that shows them the best options first and doesn't show them the kind of 40-hour flight that stops in 20 different places. So the user need there is actually a developmentistic process that allows them to interact with it in a way that they want, not to include a button. If anything, the button should be, non-direct flights include, so that people can see those non-direct flights. So just a note there on kind of user need versus user want. It's something that we've debated quite a lot within the team. There's, just for context, and Social Security Directorate, I think there was 40 of us. There's 30 user researchers now. So we're constantly playing with these kind of methods and seeing what's best. But user needs and user wants is definitely something to consider when, even within the context of insights, when you're thinking about insights. I just want to spend a little bit of time. That's the kind of the main bulk of that part. And I just wanted to talk about being a team sport. I hope that that's felt throughout, that I've been talking about collaboration, because when it comes to user research in general, it should not be a user researcher, this is what we need, here's a notification, go test it, and they go away for, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, and they come back and say, here's some insights. That's not the way that this should work. It is absolutely a team sport, particularly the development and the pooling of insights. So for me, the full UCD team should be involved in every step. We should be working together to plan what the research is. For me, the way that I do that is I sit down, particularly with content just now, and we go through, I find out what they're worried about in it. What you're worried about that you wrote, what's the thing that you don't know if people are going to understand? What's the part that you were struggling to get right, that you just couldn't get right? What are those things? And I'll use that to help plan the session so that I know where the focus is. I'll then bring them with me, and I'll have them sit in and observe the sessions, let them watch how someone's interacting with it, so that they can form their own impressions about the meaning behind what they're watching as well. And it's not just me taking stuff away and deciding what the insights is. It's a team sport. And then after each of those sessions, we'll sit and we'll talk, we'll debrief. What did we see there? What was the worrying thing? What didn't work? What did work? And we'll build that up, normally over probably 6 participants, but then you would iterate the content, hopefully, or whatever it is, and keep testing. Then the sense making, you can get away with those two things not happening. There's some pretty good functioning teams that don't do those things. I would argue for them. I think it makes it work as good as it can, and it gets to the truest insights possible. But you cannot compromise on the sense making stuff, particularly the drawing of the insights. everyone of importance, particularly UCD, because I'm biased, should be in that room when you're pulling those insights out. It cannot be left to one or two people. That's where we get the real value over teams that all want to get in together and find those juicy insights together, really pull out the stuff that matters. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk to this a little bit. I just wanted to talk through a recent example that I've been working on over the past few months, probably 16 months. So I'll frame it within the situation it was in. So we were redeveloping internal guidance for Social Security of Scotland because we did discovery work as user researchers that found that the guidance that had been developed wasn't up to scratch and it wasn't being used. That is not the fault of anyone that wrote the guidance. It's the fault of the programme for not setting the right priority for it and having it as an afterthought that gets pushed through at the last minute and focusing on other things without understanding the importance of that content within the guidance as well. So our job was to go in and redevelop it, and we redeveloped it in a number of different ways, including the content that was in it. We shortened it and we made it better. But we also changed the way that they navigated it. We changed the way that they could interact with it. We changed where it was stored to make it more prominent. And the way that we did that was through 3 iterative research sessions over the space of probably 2.5 months, maybe a little bit longer than that. But the way we started is I got together, so there was 2 user researchers, 2 content designers, a service designer, and a little bit of handheld interaction designer sometimes. But the main work was done between us as user researchers and content design because it was guidance. It's very content heavy. So basically at the very start of that, I sat down with the content designer and we had a look at the guidance and how it was in that moment. And then what we did is we went out, me and the content designer, and we used a research process that is closer to ethnography. Ethnography is a process of like observing people within their kind of real environment. I mean, the proper ethnography is like going over to tribes in like South America and watching how they living amongst them for 9 months. That's not what I did for Social Security of Scotland. I didn't go in and work for, although there were some charities maybe doing that, going in and working for a bit, but that didn't happen. But what we did is we went into where they work and we sat with them and we didn't guide it much. We just said, show me how you use your current guidance. And we just watched. We just watched and took notes, and we seen the way that they were interacting. We focused on their behaviour. What are they doing? What are they not doing? What are they using? And we found loads and loads of problems and holes within the guidance because of that. I mean, a lot of the time it was just the guidance not being used. They were using other guidance that their manager had made on like the back of a pamphlet and sent them in the team. But what we then did is we used that to inform the design of the first iteration of this new guidance. And we sat as a UCD team, all of us, and we came together and we found a new way and ran it by each other, and we developed this first go at this new guidance and this new way to interact. And we took it out again, sat with the content designer and said, right, what are you worried with here? What's the things you want us to focus on and all that stuff? And we went back out the exact same way. And we just said to the people that were working, we said, here, take this. Can this help? Use this. And we watched the way that they did it, and we learned as much as we could. And then we went back and we iterated again as a full UCD team, and we made the changes and we took it again, back again, and we did that 3 times, and we completely revolutionized the content within it, where it was stored and how it was done. And I don't believe we could have done that without such a close knit working arrangement with the UCD professionals there, particularly content and user research, where we worked so closely together on it. And that is now used as a template for the full organization when it comes to doing that. And it still doesn't look that pretty. There's still loads of room for improvement on it, but our time ran out on it. But we made a major improvement to that. Let me see. Conclusions. Oh, Jesus, the light just came on my computer. I didn't realize it'd get dark. So these are broad conclusions. So UR is not something that should be done in a silo, ever. It never should be. The results should be handed, and the results shouldn't be handed over at the time. If someone shouldn't go away and do the research and then come back in a month's time and go, there you go. That's not how user research works. That's not how you get to the best insights. And finding true insights requires research to be set up right in a way, and you'll know from this that I keep talking about focus and behaviour. It's so important. And the sense making as well needs to involve that full team. That's the way that you get to the truest insights, involving different opinions and different takes on what people have seen. And insights don't need to come from what lots of people say or do. It is a judgment call about the severity of an issue. So that pothole example is the one I always use. Something can be a massive issue and only one or two people encountered it, but it's something that you definitely need to fix. And something can be, you can see it's a bit of an issue, but it's not that bad. It's maybe not something you need to prioritise, and it would probably take hundreds of people before you go, that's something we really need to deal with. And insights are not always pain points. Even myself in this presentation, I've ended up talking a little bit more about the pain points, I think. But the truth is that it can be good things as well. It can be, we've seen that they navigate using this menu type brilliantly. They really like this phrasing or wording or this approach to the content for this, task or action. So it can be those good things as well. Don't shy away from them, because you'll start to forget what the good things were if you just focus on the pain points. You need to know what the things that work well as well. And I think that's me. Does anyone have any questions?
That was great, Kris.
I like the virtual clapping. That's really nice. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, Michelle. Did you clap, or did you put your hand up there, Michelle, or was it just a clap?
I was just clapping. It was great, though.
Thanks, Michelle.
Nia.
Sorry, does Holly want to go first?
Holly, you can go first.
Yeah, go first.
Thank you. I guess it's just two things around the reading people's behaviour and focusing more on what they do rather than what they say. I thought that was so interesting, and I was wondering, first of all, how do you do that if you're conducting some of the research online via Teams and stuff? Because I find it really hard to pick up on people's behaviours in Teams, even just on a general sort of call with somebody and trying to read body language and that sort of stuff. And then the second question I had around that was, how do you, when you get to the point of doing that successfully, how do you stop yourself from kind of projecting? And I guess coming back to what you mentioned about the third step with insights, bringing people along so as to not let your own biases get involved. But when you're just reading people's behaviour, how do you manage that? That was
So, I mean, great questions, Holly, and questions that it's important to always check in with yourself and the way that you work about, because the truth is, for a long time, what people thought, I'll tackle the second part of that first, right, which I know is a kind of strange way to tackle it, but it's on my mind, so I'll tackle it first. For a long time, the way that people thought you were supposed to deal with bias was to reject it, push it away. Oh, I'm not biased. I don't have subliminal bias. I don't have any underlying biases. But the truth is, the way that you do it is to acknowledge it. And to acknowledge it within the sessions as well, particularly sense-making sessions. So that there's two things that I do in a sense-making session. First of all, I'm very vocal. You can probably tell that with the presentation. I will say what I think. And I am very upfront about my own biases. So, for example, in that work that I covered at the end there, we found that there was some problems with the way that internal people were working, and I'm not going to say any more than that. But by the end of that, after about 6 months, I was no longer the right person to do it, because I couldn't see past the problem. I couldn't see past the fact that people weren't doing stuff right, and that bias kind of crept in so much that I stopped being able to view stuff properly, if I'm being honest. So the way that we did that is we then had another researcher take the lead for a little while until I kind of not cooled off. But so it's about acknowledging your own bias and about observing how that will affect it and then reacting to that. The other thing is, actually, within the sense making sessions, you should always be the last person to talk. So it's easy to go into a sense-making session, particularly with workshops, when they get awkward and if people aren't talking and start to tell people about what you think about what you're looking at. But if you do that, you'll just inflict your own thoughts on everyone else, and everyone will just conform to what you think. And I've learned that by doing that and having it happen, and seeing it going wrong. That's how I've learned that. So in those sessions, It's about really doing everything you can. That's why I use stickies and all these different things. Facilitate the other people to talk first. Let them share, and even sometimes hold your own thoughts back, and just let it play out. Let it play out and see what it is that you're looking at, what the insight is, what the true thing is there. And then at the end, have a conversation about what you think when everyone's shared what they think as well. And then you'll have a lot to go on. The thing to say about insights that I didn't cover much is that don't feel like you're going to cover that in an hour session. That hour session, what I do is I prioritize the buckets that I want to talk about that are the most important. I will then, as part of a UR or UCD team, go further and pull out, different areas from it. So don't try and tackle everything within a session. To the first question, doing stuff in person is absolutely the best way to do things, and I know that that's not practical for all of us. I do a bit of both. You get better insights in real life because you can watch the way that the person is behaving. You can't really watch that if you're doing it online. You can, and I've got some tips, and I'll talk a little bit about them. But like, for example, when we did all that work with the redevelopment of the guidance, we went in and sat in the offices. It's not our offices, the offices of these, like, the people and how they were working. And like, you'd be sitting beside them and they'd be like interacting with the guidance, and you'd watch them, and then you would see that they're actually using a notepad, they're pulling something out of a drawer, they're onto a second screen, and then they're like, oh, I need to ask my manager that. And I'd be like, right, let's go ask your manager. And I'll just walk with them with my laptop. So you get the full environment, the full feel for the real behaviour. It's harder to get that online, but you can do certain things to try and get it. So one of the things that I do is, like, if it's a prototype we're working with, right, I'm going to go all the way to a prototype. If it's a prototype for an application we're working with, or a website or something like that, I will give it to the person that's participating in the research, and I'll get them to share their screen, and I'll watch what they do. I'll not, and sometimes you need to, but the second option would be you share your screen and ask them to tell you what to do, but you're moving away from behaviour with that. And we need to do that sometimes. I mean, I'm doing research tomorrow, 3 sessions, and I need to do it like that. So it's just the way it is for certain things. But if you can, first of all, you should always get them to do the thing. You can do it in person and watch them. It's just so much nicer to conduct research, as well. You can just point at something and say, what about that? You don't need to, like, there's no context, it's just more natural. But if you need to do it online, there is some tips and tricks. There's some softwares as well you can use that I've not experimented with, because obviously the government won't pay for them. But there is some softwares and that out there that allow you to do more observation of how people are acting and behaving as well. But yeah, I hope that answered those questions.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Ollie.
I'll jump in if that's okay. I've also got 2 questions, Kris. The first is, do you have any advice for content people who really want to get involved in user research, but maybe, it's very siloed, or there's not much time?
Not much time.
Yeah. Second question, have you found any good ways to encourage teams to share what they learn so that everybody can benefit? I just sort of come across, I'm working on a project at the moment where I keep finding new things, and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd known about this ages ago. And I'm interested in sort of how to get other people to sort of share more openly.
Yeah. So, I mean, this I'll take the second one first, because it's on my mind. So it's a difficult one. I think in terms of sharing methods, I've found a really nice thing that I'm doing. So I'm running. There's like 30 of us as user researchers, and I started new sessions that's about showing people what we're doing and what we've learned. And the way that we're doing that is with show and tell sessions. So we've removed the kind of hierarchical nature of rocking up and telling people how they should do something and how something should be done. And what we're doing is we're getting 2 people, and normally from across the experience kind of band, with juniors up to seniors, or a lead if there's one available, which there never is. And we get them to show like more than one option for a way to approach something. So that's one of the ways that we've learned. And it's like, this is something, this is how we do it, this is why we do it this way, and we've learned. But there's not one option for how to do this. Look, here's 2 options you can take from what you need to, and choose, what methods that you like to use. So that's it from a methods point of view. From an actual sharing learnings from within actual projects, so actually from the research, it's trickier. My only advice for it is whenever I'm in a team now, I set up like UCD catch-ups, and those UCD catch-ups are just about sharing what we're looking at, what we're worried about, what we've found, just to stop silos as much as possible, because it's so easy to dive into those silos even when you're a close-knit UCD team. And I know everyone will be working in different structures and different organizations and everything will be different, but trying to get that communication up as much as possible with, you know, nice little meetings that are, I always go for informal when you're sharing anything like that. Does that answer that question a bit? Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
right.
thank you.
So first question, so honest answer to the first question is it should actually be the onus of the user researcher to involve other people, because it is of the most benefit to them, and they should know that, to get you involved and to find the content designers and bring them in and involve them. For loads of reasons, that's not always the case, typically about time, but you can make a case very easily that none of the stuff that I spoke about today really adds that much time onto anything. Those collaborative sessions, there's ways to do it, and if it is about time as well, you can do drop-ins, where if someone can't make it, they don't come, but you have it as drop-ins. But I think those dedicated times actually cut time off the full analysis process. And the thing is as well, when content is involved from day dot as well, and looking at the sessions and all that, the design solutions and implementing them is faster, because you have a lot more context and understanding. You're not getting like handed over a PowerPoint presentation and then trying to interpret what that means and how you do it. You've seen it in action, you know where it's came from. So, but how to actually do that, I mean, the only thing is to ask, which is the simplest thing in the world, isn't it? But to ask the people that's running the research, whoever it is, can I be involved? I've never met a researcher that doesn't want people involved, to be honest. If they're like that, they shouldn't be in research. So if you ask them, they should be like, oh my God, yes, please. Because I know for me, that's what I was like the first time. I came from a clinical research background where you go in a hole for 2 years and don't talk to MD and then rock back up with results. Like, the way that we can get other people involved in this is what makes it special and what makes you get to the insights. Yeah. So just have dialogue, just have communication. Say it. Say, I want to be involved. And also talk to them about the fact that it'll assist in terms of time and deadlines. It'll not add time on, it'll make everything smoother and easier, and it'll mean that you get the right design solution quicker as well. The more people that are involved and the closer you get to those true insights, I think. So it speeds everything up.
Thank you. That's
Any other questions? That's been great, Kris. My
Thanks,
head's
Dom.
buzzing. After every chat we have, my head's always buzzing. Thank you.
No, I'm glad. I hope it was useful. I'm hoping it was useful for everyone. I know that's maybe slightly a different angle to one of these pep talks because it's a user researcher. So I hope it stimulated a lot of thoughts. Yeah.
And I'm going to end the call now. Well, stop recording. People can hang around if you've got anything else to say.